Hello everyone. Today we're going to present about a comparison between the international environmental protection regimes. My name is Tipra Wu.
My name is Supamat Udom-Ratanakunchai.
I'm Salomé Boyer.
We are going to elaborate some characteristics of the three international environmental protection regimes, which are the UNFCCC, the ICAO, the IMO, and then we will compare and analyze the differences between these three regimes. But before we start, let me briefly introduce about climate change and its consequences so that we understand the necessity of controlling it. So, climate change refers to long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns, and the key causes of climate change are greenhouse gas emission and land use changes. As we all can see, these two main causes are all from human activities. So that's why we, the human beings, should be the ones who are doing something to control it. There are three main categories of consequences of climate change. The first one is the natural consequences. Some of the examples are the higher temperature, the sea level rise, and floods. Like we can kind of feel that the summers are getting hotter compared to the summers in your childhood, right? We can't live without air conditioners anymore these days. The second type is the social threats, such as threats to health, employment, and education. For example, more people are getting sick or even die from the high temperature in the summer or the colder weather in the winter in many countries. One, there was an extreme cold snap occurred in Texas in the US, which even made the power supplying equipment have a breakdown. Around 210 people died from this incident, and the economic losses was approximately 130 billion US dollars. The third type is the threats to business, such as threats to energy industry, agriculture and forestry, and tourism. Like the plants will die in drought or floods, and no one will travel to somewhere that's suffering from natural disaster, right? Here are some of the examples of consequence of climate change. The first picture is a picture of melting ice in the Arctic Pole. The second one is a person who suffers from the drought, and the third one is a picture of forest fire, which is caused by the high temperature and the dryness. From all of these examples, we can tell that it is really necessary and urgent to control climate change. And remember, one of the main factors of climate change is greenhouse gas emission. Okay, so after understanding the urgent necessity of controlling climate change, let's move on to the international environmental protection regimes. The first one we are going to talk about is the UNFCCC. The UNFCCC is the fundamental treaty that has been provided for a basis for international climate negotiations, such as Kyoto Protocols and Paris Agreement. Since it was established in 1992, nowadays there are 198 countries joining this international treaty as a member country of UNFCCC. The latest goal on greenhouse gas emission of UNFCCC can be found in the Paris Agreement. Limitations on greenhouse gas emissions are set to party countries in the Paris Agreement. Each country has a different specific goal. The emission goal of a developed country and a developing country is different. And the ultimate goal of the Paris Agreement is to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. There are 7 steps in the problem spotting and solving mechanism of UNFCCC. The first step is to recognize that there is a problem, usually supported with the scientific evidence as well. The next step is to set a lofty but specific goal, just like the goal of limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius set in the Paris Agreement. And then there are specific goals and limitations on greenhouse gas of each member country. The third step is to put the onus on the developed countries to lead the way. The fourth step is to direct new funds to climate change activities in developing countries. Actually, not just funds in the Paris Agreement, the developed countries also obligated to provide technology transfer other than financial support to developing countries in order to help the developing countries in achieving their greenhouse gas emission goals. The fifth step is to keep tabs on the problems and the progress that has been made. This one of the biggest contributions made by UNFCCC is that it established an updating and reporting system among the member countries of UNFCCC, or basically among the countries in the world. In the Paris Agreement, it also states that every country should report their progress done and their ambition to limiting greenhouse gas emission in every 5 years. It's always good to keep everyone updated, and it's a good reminder as well. The sixth step is to chart the beginnings of a path to strike a delicate balance. And the last step is to kick off normal considerations.
Now the ICAO. ICAO stands for the International Civil Aviation Organization. It's a special agency of the United Nations that set international standards and regulations for civil aviation, promoting safe, secure, and efficient air travel worldwide. ICAO established guidelines for aircraft operations and navigation, environmental protections, and aviation security. The International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO, has established goals to address greenhouse gas emissions from aviation. One of the key initiatives is the carbon offsetting and reduction scheme for international aviation CORSIA, aimed at stabilizing emissions at 2020 levels. CORSIA encouraged airlines to offset any emissions above this baseline through carbon credits and sustainable practice. ICAO implements policy and strategies to control greenhouse gas emission through initiatives like CORSIA, focusing on offsetting measures and promoting more fuel-efficient technologies in international civil aviation.
So now I'm going to present you IMO, which is the International Maritime Organization, which is a UN specialized agency established in 1948. So this organization has a responsibility for the safety and security of shipping and for the prevention of marine and atmospheric pollution by ships. And nowadays, there are 175 member states. IMO is the source of approximately 60 legal instruments, and among them we can cite MARPOL, which is the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships, which was adopted in 1973, and which covers accidents and operational oil pollution, but also different types of pollution by chemicals, goods, garbage, and air pollution. IMO also enacted a Port State Control Authority, which allowed domestic maritime authorities such as Coast Guards to inspect foreign flag ships calling at the ports to control if the environmental measures are respected. IMO aims to address several issues such as the safety at sea, the marine pollution, search and rescue, wreck removal, tonnage measurements, liability and compensation for marine pollution, ship recycling, training and certification of seafarers, piracy, and tackling climate change. IMO has a goal to reduce GHG emission, and IMO adopted an initial strategy to reduce GHG emission in 2018, but this initial strategy was revised in 2023. So the 2023 IMO strategy on reduction of GHG emission from ships is a framework from the member states which set out the future vision for international shipping, the different levels of ambition to reduce GHG emission, and it's also set out guiding principles to achieve the goals that they have. So the 2023 IMO strategy identifies 4 levels of ambition. The first one wants a carbon intensity of the ships to decline through further improvements of the energy efficiency for new ships. The second one wants the carbon intensity of international shipping to decline by at least 40% by 2030. The third one wants zero or near zero GHG emission technologies, fuels or energy sources to increase. And the final level of emission is the GHG emission from international shipping to reach net zero around 2050. So to reach net zero GHG emission from international shipping, IMO Convention decided to put 2 indicative checkpoints. So the first checkpoint is to reduce the total annual GHG emissions from international shipping by at least 20%, striving for 30% by 2030 compared to the emission of 2008. And the second checkpoint is to reduce the total annual GHG emissions from international shipping by at least 70%, striving for 80% by 2040 compared to the emission of 2008. To attain this goal, IMO decided to take a basket of candidate measures, which are comprised of a technical elements and an economic element. The technical element is a goal-based marine fuel standard regulating the phase reduction of the marine fuel's GHG intensity, and the economic element is based on a maritime GHG emission pricing mechanism. But for the moment, IMO is not sure what are going to be the basket of candidate measures. So we can see that IMO has clear objectives concerning the reduction of GHG emission, but there are no clear implementation mechanisms that are put into place yet.
Now it's time to compare the strategies and goals of the three regimes. The first one to talk about is the UNFCCC. So does the UNFCCC tend to pursue it in a softer or harsher manner? I think the answer will be a softer manner, since the UNFCCC doesn't really have the power to force any country to do anything. In my personal view, it's pretty much difficult for an international organization to force any country to do anything, like how the judicial system can do within a country. However, in order to make sure the party countries may achieve their goals, the goals set by UNFCCC are specific but yet flexible to each country. Specifying the goal and lowering the difficulty in achieving the goal is a good way to encourage a person or the country to start doing something. What are the factors that the UNFCCC can affect to control emission of greenhouse gases? Firstly, the UNFCCC organizes conferences of the parties, or COP, where countries negotiate and enter into international agreements to address climate changes. Next, the UNFCCC establishes MRV systems to monitor, report, and verify the progress of countries in meeting their emission reduction targets. This enhances transparency and accountability in the implementation of climate action plans. The UNFCCC can also help control the emission of greenhouse gases by providing help in capacity building, financial support, technology transfer, and research and knowledge sharing in party countries, especially in developing countries. Last but not least, the UNFCCC plays a role in raising public awareness about climate change and the importance of individual and collective action as well. So, how is the effectiveness of the strategies of the UNFCCC? I will say that the Paris Agreement isn't really that effective in reaching its specific goal, but the UNFCCC is equipped to provide rules for climate protection activities and should consistently expand its feature to improve its impact.
ICAO generally adopts a softer approach, emphasizing collaborations and consensus in its efforts to address aviation-related challenges, including environmental issues, which they can control greenhouse gas emissions through initiatives like CORSIA, setting emission reduction goals, promoting sustainable practice, and implementing carbon offset programs. The effectiveness of ICAO strategies, particularly CORSIA, depends on factors like international cooperation, industry compliance, and adaptability to evolving challenges. Ongoing evaluation is essential to assess their success in controlling greenhouse gas emission in aviation. CORSIA, or the Carbon Offsetting and Reduction Scheme for International Aviation, works by setting a baseline for average emission from international aviation initially between 2019 to 2020. Participating airlines must offset emission exceeding this baseline by purchasing carbon credits from emission reduction projects. CORSIA has a phased implementation includes monitoring and reporting requirement, and aim to ensure environmental integrity through high-quality offset projects. The scheme is part of global effort to mitigate the impact of aviation on climate change. CORSIA concrete goals are to stabilize and offset the growth of carbon dioxide emission from international aviation at the 2020 baseline. It achieved this by requiring participating airlines to offset any emission exceeding this baseline through the purchase of carbon credits from approved emission reduction projects. CORSIA is part of global efforts to address climate change and promote sustainability in the aviation industry.
Concerning the strategies of AMO concerning the reduction of GHG emission, we can see that IMO tends to persuade in a softer manner the states. Indeed, IMO wants to facilitate the voluntary cooperation of the states and the ports. The 2023 strategy is not legally binding in itself, but the measures to implement this strategy can be. And this can lead to different consequences for the states if they didn't respect the legally binding measures, such as international sanctions, fines, port exclusion, and bad international reputation. So to control the emission of GHG, IMO wants to develop technological innovation and a global introduction of alternative fuels and energy sources to attain the goals of the 2023 strategy. And for the effectiveness of this strategy, we can see that the measures to implement the strategy are not defined for the moment, so it is difficult to know if the strategy is really going to be effective. But we know that some experts complain about this strategy because they wanted it to be more ambitious. So finally, to conclude and to compare the three organizations, we can see that the three organizations use a soft approach to implement their measures. States need to cooperate for the organizations to achieve their goal, and the three organizations try to adapt their goals to national circumstances or particularities. The three organizations permits to reduce GHG emissions in every area, and each one of them try to help countries in their transition to reduce the burden it can represent for them to reduce their GHG emissions. So in the end, we can see that the effectiveness of this organization depends on the will of states to implement their measures, and it can encourage states to join the organization due to the lack of real legal consequences. And at the same time, international pressure of other states can encourage them to act. So that's it for this presentation. Thank you everyone for listening to us, and bye.